On January 3, 2026, the world was stunned as U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in Caracas, an event that sent shockwaves through international capitals and left millions glued to their screens. The operation unfolded in the early hours, with armored vehicles rolling through the city's streets and helicopters circling overhead, as rumors swirled and uncertainty gripped the nation. The bold move was ordered directly by President Donald Trump, who addressed the world from the White House, declaring that the United States could no longer stand by as Venezuela descended further into chaos. His announcement was met with both applause and outrage, as global leaders scrambled to respond to the sudden escalation. This unprecedented military intervention marked a dramatic escalation in U.S. policy, shifting from years of economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure to direct action on foreign soil. The world watched in disbelief as American troops patrolled Caracas, igniting fierce debate about sovereignty, intervention, and the future of democracy in Latin America. The move sparked protests in cities around the globe, with some hailing it as a necessary step to restore order, while others condemned it as a dangerous precedent. Venezuela, already in crisis after years of hyperinflation, food shortages, and political repression, now faces a power vacuum and deep uncertainty. Ordinary citizens, exhausted by years of hardship, woke up to a new reality, one filled with both hope and fear. The streets of Caracas were eerily quiet, as families wondered what the coming days would bring. The nation's vast oil reserves and years of political strife have made it a focal point of international tension. For decades, Venezuela's oil wealth has attracted both allies and adversaries, fueling internal divisions and drawing the attention of powerful nations. Now, with Maduro gone, the fate of these resources and the people who depend on them hangs in the balance. Maduro's removal raises urgent questions that reverberate far beyond Venezuela's borders. Who controls Venezuela now? Will a new leader emerge from the chaos, or will rival factions plunge the country into deeper turmoil? How will the military respond? The armed forces, long seen as kingmakers in Venezuelan politics, now face a critical choice: support a new civilian government, seize power themselves, or fracture under pressure. What will the people do? Across the country, Venezuelans are taking to the streets, some demanding democracy, others fearing foreign occupation, all desperate for stability and a voice in their nation's future. The international community watches anxiously, fearing either a democratic transition or a descent into chaos. The United Nations has called for restraint, while neighboring countries brace for a possible wave of refugees and regional instability. Meanwhile, Maduro sits in a New York detention center, isolated from the turmoil he once ruled, while his government scrambles to maintain control and the opposition senses opportunity. In back rooms and embassies, frantic negotiations are underway, as exiled leaders and foreign diplomats jockey for influence. This is the beginning of a new, unpredictable chapter for Venezuela and the region, a moment of profound uncertainty, where the hopes and fears of millions hang in the balance and the world waits to see what comes next. The operation to seize Nicolas Maduro was a meticulously planned, rapid, and forceful strike by U.S. Special Forces in the heart of Caracas. Under the cover of darkness, elite units moved with precision, their movements coordinated with intelligence assets on the ground and in the air. Helicopters thundered overhead, casting searchlights across the city as teams closed in on Maduro's heavily fortified compound. The mission was designed to be swift, minimizing the window for resistance or escape, and to send a clear message to both allies and adversaries. The assault resulted in intense firefights, leading to heavy casualties among Maduro's personal guards and significant collateral damage in the surrounding neighborhoods. Buildings were left smoldering, and the chaos spilled into the streets, leaving a trail of destruction that would haunt the city for days to come. Within hours, Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, were apprehended and swiftly transported to the Caracas airport. Under the watchful eyes of heavily armed soldiers, they were loaded onto a waiting C-17 Globemaster III and flown directly to New York. The world watched as the once unassailable leader was taken into custody, symbolizing a dramatic and unprecedented shift in power for Venezuela. But the cost of the raid was not just political. The violence and destruction left behind underscored the profound human toll for ordinary Venezuelans. Families emerged from their homes to find shattered windows, damaged buildings, and loved ones injured or missing. For many, the operation brought not hope, but fear and uncertainty about what would come next. U.S. officials credited months of painstaking intelligence work, surveillance, and a vast network of informants for the operation's success. Behind the scenes, analysts pored over maps and intercepted communications, piecing together Maduro's movements and routines. Informants risked their lives to provide crucial details, making the raid possible. During the raid, internet and power blackouts swept across Caracas, plunging the city into confusion and darkness. These blackouts were not accidental. They were a deliberate tactic to disrupt communication, control the narrative, and prevent news of the operation from spreading too quickly. For many Venezuelans, the sudden loss of connectivity added to the fear and uncertainty of the night. Now Maduro sits in a U.S. detention center, awaiting his first court appearance. The world's cameras are trained on him as he prepares to face charges in a high-profile legal battle that could reshape Venezuela's future and set new precedents in international law. For the Trump administration, this moment is the culmination of years of promises to hold Maduro accountable for alleged crimes. Officials tout the operation as a major foreign policy victory, emphasizing their commitment to supporting democracy and justice in the region. For the international community, however, the spectacle is both shocking and controversial. The operation has sparked heated debates about national sovereignty, the limits of U.S. power, and the future of international law. Headlines around the globe question what this means for the balance of power in Latin America and beyond. The military operation may be over, but the legal and political fallout is just beginning. As Venezuela's parliament convenes an emergency session and analysts debate the implications, the world waits to see how this unprecedented chapter in history will unfold. Maduro faces U.S. charges of narco-terrorism and drug trafficking, accused of leading the cartel of the Suns and conspiring with FARC to flood the U.S. with cocaine. The U.S. frames the operation as a last resort in the war on drugs, but critics argue it's a cover for regime change and resource control. Trump's open talk of seizing Venezuela's oil only fuels skepticism about U.S. motives. Maduro's defense will challenge the legality of his capture and the court's jurisdiction, making the trial a global test of American power. The world is watching to see if justice or geopolitics will prevail. In Caracas, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez was declared interim leader, backed by the Supreme Court and military, framing Maduro's capture as a temporary incapacity. The government projects unity, with leaders like Diosdado Cabello denouncing the U.S. as imperialist aggressors and vowing resistance. Behind the scenes, tensions simmer between hardliners and those considering negotiation. Rodriguez faces threats from both the U.S. and internal factions, making her position precarious. The military, led by Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino, pledges to defend sovereignty, but its true loyalty is uncertain. Calls for demonstrations and the government's efforts to maintain order will test its survival. The coming days will reveal whether unity holds or fractures emerge. Caracas is tense, with military checkpoints and patrols everywhere, as the government tries to deter unrest. Ordinary Venezuelans are gripped by fear and uncertainty, unsure what the future holds after years of hardship. The military's next move is crucial. Will it support the interim government, the opposition, or act independently? The opposition, led by Edmundo Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado, calls for a peaceful transition based on the disputed 2024 election. Their hopes rest on the military breaking with the Chavista regime. Meanwhile, the threat of violence, civil conflict, or deeper crisis looms large. On the Colombian border, fears of a refugee surge grow. The nation waits, caught between hope and dread. President Trump has made clear the U.S. intends to oversee Venezuela's transition, including direct control of its vast oil reserves. American oil companies are invited in, signaling an economic takeover under the guise of stabilization. Trump's administration is willing to work with interim leader Rodriguez, if she cooperates, or else face consequences. The operation, conducted without congressional approval, raises constitutional and legal questions in the U.S. Officials defend it as necessary for national security, but the deployment of a U.S. naval fleet suggests a long-term occupation. The plan sidelines Venezuela's democratic opposition in favor of American dominance. The world sees not just a war on drugs but a bid for power and resources. The U.S. action has drawn swift and widespread condemnation from Latin American nations, who see the intervention as a dangerous breach of regional sovereignty and a return to an era of foreign interference many hoped was over. Leaders across the continent have issued strong statements, warning that such actions undermine the principles of self-determination and could destabilize the entire region. The European Union, China, and even the Pope have joined the chorus of criticism, each expressing grave concerns about the violation of Venezuela's sovereignty and the potential for escalating conflict. The EU has called for restraint and dialogue, while China has denounced what it calls interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign nation. Around the world, protests have erupted, and news outlets are filled with debates, all decrying the violation of Venezuela's sovereignty and the precedent it sets for future interventions. Regional powers warn that this move could set a dangerous precedent, fueling instability and mistrust among neighboring countries. Emergency meetings at the Organization of American States reflect the deep unease spreading through diplomatic circles. Meanwhile, the U.S. finds itself increasingly isolated on the world stage, with critics accusing Washington of acting out of economic self-interest rather than genuine concern for democracy or human rights. Despite the official criticism, some members of the Venezuelan diaspora have taken to the streets in celebration, hopeful that Maduro's removal could finally open the door to democratic change and a brighter future for their homeland. Yet, even among supporters of intervention, there is anxiety. Many worry that the U.S. may sideline Venezuela's own opposition leaders, imposing its own agenda and risking the country's fragile path toward self-governance. The Trump administration's unilateral approach has not only damaged diplomatic ties with allies and adversaries alike, but also eroded America's moral authority on the global stage, raising questions about the future of international cooperation. The world is now deeply divided. Governments and international organizations condemn the intervention, while exiles and some opposition groups cling to hope for change. Across continents, people watch anxiously, uncertain and fearful about what the next chapter will bring for Venezuela and the world. The crisis has exposed deep rifts, not only within Venezuela, but also among nations and communities worldwide, as debates rage over the legitimacy and consequences of intervention. Families are divided, friendships are tested, and the world's attention is fixed on Venezuela, highlighting just how interconnected and fragile global politics have become. As the dust settles, the future of international norms and the rule of law hangs in the balance, with the outcome in Venezuela likely to shape global responses to crises for years to come. For millions of Venezuelans, Maduro's capture has brought only deeper fear and uncertainty. Information blackouts and rampant rumors leave people anxious and isolated, unsure whom to trust. Daily life is fraught with risk, as families hunker down, waiting for the next crisis. The U.S. has revoked protected status for Venezuelans in America, threatening mass deportations and sowing panic among the diaspora. Ordinary people feel trapped between a defiant regime and a foreign power with its own agenda. The democratic opposition offers hope, but lacks real power. For now, Venezuelans can only wait, hoping to survive the storm. Venezuela stands at a crossroads, its future shaped by the power struggle between the interim government, the military, the opposition, and the U.S. The military's loyalty will determine whether the country stabilizes or descends into conflict. Trump's plan for direct control clashes with calls for a democratic transition led by Gonzalez and Machado. International condemnation may isolate the U.S., but only concrete action will alter its course. Regional actors and armed groups could further complicate the crisis. Maduro's removal has solved one problem but created many more, leaving Venezuela's fate uncertain. The next days will decide whether the nation moves toward democracy or deeper turmoil.